Hello, today is Monday, April 6th. Welcome to episode 579 of Fault Lines, the National Security Institute's podcast that gets you quickly up to speed 3 times a week on the national security and foreign policy debates shaking up America. I'm NSI Senior Fellow Morgan Vina, and I'm joined today by the OG crew. First up, we've got founder and executive director Jamil Jaffer, advisory board member Lester Munson, Senior Fellow Jessica Jones, and the one, the only director of policy, John Lipsey, who is gracing us with his presence. So glad to see you, John. Okay, everyone. So today we are back in Iran. I know we did a brief break from the region last week, or I should say on Friday, to talk about what did we talk about? We talked about Artemis and the dark side of the moon. Apparently, we're going to be seeing more news on that today, so stay tuned. But today we are talking about Iran, where we actually had some really good news over this weekend. After a U.S. F-15 fighter pilot was shot down over southwestern Iran on Friday. Both crew members were able to eject. One was rescued. The other one, well, he had a bit of a longer journey home. After a harrowing operation Saturday night, he was recovered. This was a massive rescue effort involving hundreds of military and intelligence personnel. The airman was from the 494th Fighter Squadron. He evaded Iranian forces for over 24 hours, even hiked up a 7,000-foot ridge line to avoid capture. As I was saying that before we started recording, that could cause some altitude sickness, so well done on him. The CIA even initiated a deception campaign to try to confuse Iranian forces and convince them that the airmen had already been rescued. For the mission itself, special operators were deployed and extracted the airmen. They were flown by helicopter to an airstrip inside Iran. Their rides out of the country, though, were a little bit more complicated. The planes that they were supposed to fly out on apparently didn't work. And so they had to wait for other planes to be flown in before they were able to get out. Needless to say, this is what Hollywood blockbusters are made of. I think Americans have a lot to be proud of today. And so President Trump is likely to echo this in a press conference at 1:00 this afternoon. So we will all be staying tuned for that. So team, we're just going to get into this with some questions. Jamil, I'm going to start with you. This was a pretty high risk mission, and it could have gone sideways really quickly. While we're glad to have our service members back, can we just talk a little bit about how they came to be behind enemy lines? Iran had previously bragged about using a new air defense system to regain control of their airspace. I thought, have we not sufficiently disabled these after 6 weeks?
Yeah, look, Morgan, there have been a lot of talk about the U.S. establishing not just air superiority over Iran, but air supremacy after Israel decimated Iran's air defenses a few months back. The U.S. came in, we took out a whole chunk more of their air defense systems, and yet it appears clear that they have defensive air capabilities. It sounds like they may be using infrared capabilities, heat-seeking missiles that don't rely on the radar systems that we've destroyed in order to take down this aircraft. This wasn't the only aircraft hit, by the way, this F-15E Strike Eagle. There's also an A-10 Warthog that was hit in operations over Iran on the same day. That pilot was able to eject once outside of Iran and was rescued. But it is obviously a problem that the Iranians are able to shoot down American fighter jets, and that we nearly lost the weapons system officer here who evaded capture, and eventually was rescued. Of course, the other piece of this story that, as you laid out, Morgan, is this issue of how things, to your point, could have really gone wrong. We've seen challenges like this. We saw in Venezuela where U.S. aircraft was hit during the operation. It was able to get away wounded and damaged, but survived. We saw Desert One, obviously, where we didn't even get off the ground in the 1970s, and they have to rescue the Iranian hostages. We remember what happened in the Abbottabad raid, where we had to destroy a stealth Black Hawk helicopter that was on the ground once its tail rotor hit the side of the compound. And of course, here, two American transport planes stuck on that sand airstrip, and such as it was, with their nose wheels stuck in the ground, and ultimately having to be blown up along with a few Little Bird helicopters in order to preserve the operational capabilities. And so it's a really interesting scenario. I mean, this could have gone wrong in a lot of ways. The Iranian ground troops could have captured the soldier. They could have captured our men and women who were on the ground. There were boots on the ground inside of Iran for the first time in this operation. So a lot could have gone wrong, but it didn't. It worked out successfully. Ultimately, we lost a couple of large planes and some helicopters, but we saved our people, and that's a huge win for America.
Yep. So, Lipsy, following up on this harrowing operation, President Trump on Easter Sunday announced Power Plant Tuesday. Specifically, he threatened to target the not the Straits of Hormuz, but the power plant civilian infrastructure in Iran, including power plants and bridges, if the Straits of Hormuz are not reopened. This, of course, is a major issue for the United States, for European and Asian partners around the world that rely on Iranian or oil flowing through the Straits of Hormuz that Iran is now closing. So, talk to me a little bit about how we see this all going down tomorrow. Do you think President Trump's going to follow through on these threats?
Yeah, it sure looks that way. I think what was interesting about about Trump's truth post, other than its colorful language, was the deal that he essentially was proposing was effectively protection for Iran's energy infrastructure should they open the Strait of Hormuz. Iran seems to have rejected that and is unwilling to agree to that kind of sort of ceasefire, and instead is deploying the strait as its one point of leverage to try to bring a conclusive end to the war. The other sort of interesting, so I do think we're going to see sort of escalation and further action from the president. But the other interesting aspect going on in the background on this is over at the UN, where Bahrain is leading an effort to get a UN Security Council resolution adopted around the strait. And its defeat on, I believe it was Thursday or Friday, where China, Russia, and our friends in France voted against the resolution because it authorized all necessary means, which would of course include military action, to open the strait. And now we seem to be potentially headed toward a new resolution that would authorize only defensive measures. It's unclear whether the other members of Security Council will go along with that. It seems not, but I think that this is demonstrating sort of, notwithstanding Iran attacking ships in international waters, closing the Strait of Hormuz, bringing a screeching halt to a significant amount of the global economy. This is a great counterfactual for the Iran situation overall, where the Security Council simply will not act in defense of these matters and against Iran, because of course they are allied with Russia and China against the U.S. and the West, and that of course has bound up all of our allies in being sort of finding difficulty in acting alongside us because of the Security Council's lack of endorsement of activity here. So I do think we move forward, and my guess is the UN will continue to be sort of frozen in time.
I think we are all shocked by that assessment. That and France capitulating to foreign powers. I mean, who would have thought, right?
Well, they seem to get a couple ships through the strait the following day.
Ooh.
Mm-hmm.
How do you
Funny how that
surrender monkey in French? Need to know that.
Sacre bleu. Sorry, I took under on that. All right, Jess, your thoughts?
Yeah, I think for all the things, Lipsy and Jamil have said, like, what an amazing accomplishment bringing back, service members and And this, it's made the headlines. To your point, Morgan, it's going to be a movie in the future, most likely. It's just depending who's going to be our main actor in it. But, for me, I kind of contrast that with some of the reporting that came out last week about the president asking the department to bring in plans for going in and removing enriched uranium in Iran, right? Which would be a massive operation. Their facilities are hundreds of miles inland. They have, we've obliterated them. So that, they're talking about not only airlifting in, service members, but also massive equipment, right, to actually excavate uranium. And then there's also the question of how it's enriched uranium, handling it and removing it safely. And then, of course, the question of, did we get everything? If not, what was the point of that? And so, I put in contrast, are Americans ready for an operation of that scale? If you don't even need things to go sideways for that to be, anticipated loss of life. And, have we heard from the president the grounds and the reasons for doing so, an immediate need, a clear need, and are Americans ready for it? I'm just really not sure. I mean, but I think Lipsy brings up and you brought up, Morgan, the Truth Social post from Sunday. I think the president is starting to realize that might not be a go. And so you see this, what did you call it? Flowery language, John, about, Power Plant Tuesday. And I think he's just truly over it. And he's like, I let's do it. Right. I think he's facing a really hard spot. And I think to John's point, we're going to see escalation, but I think he's worried about loss of American life, and that's not going to go over well with the public.
Yeah. So we've seen, in the last 6 weeks, a lot of, losses in terms of, capabilities. Obviously, these require financial resources. And there's a lot been made about the supplemental. At first, we heard about a $50 billion supplemental. Lately, it's been a $200 billion supplemental. We were expecting it to see it potentially included in the president's budget request coming out last Friday. I don't think it was in there last I heard. The SUP is still with OMB being discussed. What are your thoughts on this? Obviously, it's a huge budget coming in at 1.5 trillion. So talk to me about why this matters.
Well, you got to pay for the war, as we pointed out, even though, in the grand scheme of things, Iran is not shooting down significant numbers of American equipment, planes, or otherwise. Like, let's just level set here. This is, while we care about every single American involved in this fight, and 13 casualties is 13 too many. And strategically speaking, we've had the run of the place, and the ability of Iran to shoot down one F-15 out of 10,000 sorties is strategically insignificant. I think there is some arguing inside the administration on how big this supplemental request should be. $200 billion is a lot of money. That is a whole lot of money. It's more than we spent in Ukraine during the Biden administration. It's a lot. So I can understand why there might be some folks who are thinking we could do it for a little bit less. I want to highlight one other thing, Morgan, which is that this story of rescuing the American pilot is one of the most amazing stories we've ever seen. We kind of saw it playing out in real time. There was a CIA deception operation designed to confuse the Iranians. We had these amazing guys go in and rescue the weapons officer from the F-15 Eagle over the course of about 24 hours. Incredible story. Incredible. And the guy is rescued on Easter, the day in the Christian faith when Jesus rises from the dead. Like, it's incredible. Donald Trump, after the news comes out, waits 11 minutes before using the F word in a social media post and throws down the gauntlet with the Iranians and says, you got to end this thing by Tuesday night or I'm going to blow up all of your bridges, power plants, and dams. I got to tell you, what was going on during those 11 minutes? That may be the sequel to the amazing movie that's going to come out starring probably John Krasinski as the weapons guy running up the mountain in Iran who gets rescued. So let's just level set here. We are living in amazing times, my friends. You could not make any of this up.
All right. Well, on that note, that's a wrap. Thanks as always to Kelly Crowley, Grace Trice, Claude Jennings, and the NSI staff for their help in producing today's episode. Join us on Wednesday, April 8th, for another episode of Fault Lines, the National Security Institute's podcast that gets you smart, fast in the national security and foreign policy debates shaking up America. We are on YouTube, so check out the channel for a video of today's episode and for, John Lipsy's amazing cord headphones. Who knew those still existed?
Best
if you were-
audio on the podcast.
Vote now. Who sounds the
Good job,
best?
Who wore it
If you
best?
like what you heard, be sure to rate, review, and subscribe. See you Wednesday.